Hello, and welcome back to Void Whispers. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy the Void Whispers that creep in during the dead of night, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1. It's dumber than hell. His mama shouted the words from the porch while he finished loading the last of his bags into the car. Her voice was old and rough from sickness, but it still had the same power it had carried when he was a child. It could still stop him in place. It could still make him feel like a boy who had stayed out too late and forgotten to call home. He closed the trunk and stood there for a second, with his hand resting on the cold metal. He did not look back right away. If he looked at her too soon, he knew he might not leave. The car was packed. The paperwork was signed. The years of training, studying, waiting, and fighting for a position like this had all led to this morning. But none of that mattered when his mother stood on the porch in her robe, one thin hand gripping her walker, her face tight with anger that was really fear. All those years in school, she croaked. All that money spent. And for what? Just so they can send my son to the bottom of hell to tell us it's cold? He finally turned around and tried to smile. There's a bit more to it than that, Mama. She gave him a look that said she did not care how much more there was to it. In her mind, the whole thing was foolish, dangerous, far away from home, far away from her. He walked up the porch steps and wrapped his arms around her. At first, he meant it only as a quick hug, something to calm her down and soften the goodbye. But when he felt how light she was, how small she had become inside his arms, he held on tighter. It scared him. She felt like she might float away if he let go. Like the only thing keeping her on this earth was his grip around her shoulders. For one terrible moment, he imagined releasing her and watching her rise through the porch roof, past the trees, past the clouds, joining all the things he was not ready to lose. Well, she said against his chest, trying to sound annoyed even though he could hear the sadness under it, agree to disagree. That made him laugh, and it almost broke him. She pulled back and pointed one bony finger at him. Just come back. You hear me? Or I'll go down there and drag your sorry ass back up here myself. I know you would, he said. And don't think I won't. He kissed her forehead. Her skin smelled like soap, medicine, and the tea she drank every morning. Then he forced himself to leave before he changed his mind. As he drove down the road, he watched her in the rearview mirror. She stood there for as long as she could, leaning on that walker, refusing to go inside until his car had almost disappeared. He saw her begin the slow journey back through the front door, each step careful, each movement painful. The urge to slam on the brakes hit him so hard that his foot actually lifted from the gas. He could still turn around. He could reverse the car, pull back into the driveway, unpack his bags, and call the operation chief. He could tell them he was out. He could say his mother needed him. He could throw away all the training, all the ambition, all the pride, and spend the rest of her days making sure she never had to stand alone on that porch again. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Then he drove on. The first thing he did in the helicopter was read the numbers. Temperature, -34 degrees. Elevation, 7,836 feet. Wind speed, 26 kilometers per hour. Atmospheric pressure, 674 hectopascals. Nearest human being, 572 kilometers. He read the information once, then again, then again. The numbers sat on the page like facts should, clean and simple and harmless. But the more he stared at them, the more they seemed to open into something deep and dark, 572 kilometers from the nearest human being. He tried to imagine that distance. He tried to picture every kilometer as a road, a field, a town, a place with lights and windows. But there was none of that where he was going. There was only ice, wind, and sky. A heat rose in his stomach. It burned upward until he thought he might vomit inside the helicopter. Motion sickness, he told himself. Just blame it on motion sickness. The pilot spoke into the radio, giving coordinates to base camp. The man barely heard him. He kept repeating the rules in his head like a prayer. Follow the protocols. They are there to save you. Follow the protocols. They are there to save you. Follow the protocols. They are there to save you. Landing in 5, everyone. The pilot called back. The words snapped him out of his thoughts. He had always believed in reason. That was what people said about him. He was rational, intelligent, hard working. The kind of son mothers in the neighborhood mentioned when they wanted their own boys to try harder. His mother had been so proud when he graduated that he had not needed to search the crowd for her. Her pride had shone brighter than anyone else there. That was why telling her about Antarctica had nearly destroyed him. When he first told her he had been selected for a temporary research post near McMurdo Station, she stared at him like he had announced his own death. He explained the science. He explained the opportunity. He explained that the work mattered. He explained that it was safe as long as he followed the rules. But none of it reached her. She heard only one thing. Her only son was leaving her while cancer was still eating away at her body. She loved him more than she loved her own next breath. Because of that, she did not stop him. She wanted to. He could see it, but she knew him too well. Once he set his mind on something, he went after it. She had raised him that way. His dreams had become one of the things that helped her keep fighting. So she let him go. When the helicopter touched down, the cold hit him even before he stepped outside. It pressed against the aircraft like a living wall. The sun was blinding, reflecting off endless snow until the whole world seemed made of white fire. There were no trees, no roads, no birds, no dark earth, nothing soft or human, just a frozen white expanse reaching in every direction, flat and endless under the terrible bright sky. This place had been the goal of most of his adult life. Standing there, he suddenly wondered why. He watched the helicopter lift off after the supplies were unloaded. It rose in a cloud of white powder, turned in the air, and moved away. He kept watching until it became a small, dark speck. Then the speck vanished into the bright distance, swallowed by the frozen nothing around him. Only then did he turn to the structure that would be his home for the next 3 weeks. It was not much bigger than a shipping container. A large metal door faced the empty world, and welded onto it was a sign that read McMurdo Station, Temp Lab 2309. The letters looked sharp and official, as if a sign could make the place feel safe. Inside, the lab was narrow, practical, and cold, in a way the heaters could only fight, never defeat. There was a cot bolted against one wall, a small workstation with monitors and instruments, storage cabinets, food rations, a working toilet, and a tiny shower. Supplies had been measured for 3 weeks. Enough food, enough water, enough fuel, enough emergency gear. The Americans had provided everything with their usual confidence. The Yankees spare no expense, he thought. His mother used to joke that his Canadian pride had come from his father. The man would not know. His father had left before memory could turn him into anything real. By the time he finished unpacking, checking systems, and securing his personal items, it was midnight. But the sun still burned outside as if it were midday. It would not set for another 9 days. After that, it would disappear for 6 months. The work itself was simple. almost too simple. 3 times a day, he had to record temperature, wind speed, atmospheric pressure, and a few other readings. He had trained for far more complicated things than this. Most of the machines did the hard work for him. His job was to observe, document, and stay alive. The real challenge was not science. It was isolation. He knew that before he arrived. Everyone knew it. The human mind was not made for places like this. People needed voices, faces, movement, normal darkness, normal light. They needed the sense that the world around them wanted them to live. Antarctica did not give that sense. It did not hate people. Hate would have been too warm. It simply did not care. That first week, while the sun still hung in the sky, he built a routine. He recorded data. He checked equipment. He ate rationed meals that tasted mostly of salt and plastic. He read books from the backpack he had been allowed to bring. Adventure novels, dramas, old paperbacks with cracked spines. He had packed too many, but he was grateful for every one of them. At night, or what should have been night, he lay on his cot and tried to read while the wind screamed against the 1-inch thick glass porthole in the door. The sound never truly stopped. It rose and fell, but it was always there, rubbing against the metal walls like something huge trying to get in. The lab was built to protect him from cold that could kill in minutes, but the thin space between safety and death made him feel strangely small. He would look at the door and think of it less as a door and more as the lid of a bunker. Outside was the killing engine. Inside was one man, a few machines, and a bed too narrow for comfort. He tried not to think too much. Thinking too much was dangerous. So he read until the words blurred. He recorded his numbers. He made coffee. He sent routine updates to base. He told himself the same things again and again. Follow the protocols. They are there to save you. When the sun finally began to set, he stood at the porthole and watched. He had never seen anything like it. The white landscape caught colors he did not know snow could hold. Gold became orange. Orange became red. Red softened into purple and blue. The sky looked like every beautiful thing in the world had been poured out across the ice for one last farewell. The snow reflected it all back until the horizon glowed like the edge of heaven. He thought of his mother then. He thought of her porch, her walker, her old hands, her sharp voice, and the way she had hugged him like she wanted to keep his bones inside her arms. He prayed quietly, though he was not always a praying man. He thanked God for beauty. He thanked him for his mother. He asked, without saying the words clearly, to be allowed to see them both again. 15 minutes later, he looked out the porthole from his cot and felt his mind stumble. Black. There was nothing outside. The sky that had been burning with color was gone. The world beyond the glass had become a black hole. No shape, no horizon, no snow, no sky. Just absolute darkness pressed against the window. I have been swallowed, he thought. He rolled away from the door and pulled the blanket up to his shoulders. Best not think of that now. The wind was stronger in the dark. The last reading had shown 85 kilometers per hour. The container rattled and groaned around him, metal popping softly as the temperature dropped. He tried to let the sound become familiar, a lullaby of iron and wind. Then he heard it. Knock, knock, knock. A pause. Knock, knock, knock. His eyes opened. He stayed facing the wall. No, he thought. The wind shook the lab again, and for a moment he convinced himself that was all it had been. Loose equipment. A sensor cable. Ice striking the hull. Something normal. Then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. Pause, knock, knock, knock. He turned over slowly and stared at the porthole in the door. It gave him nothing, just black glass with frost creeping along the edges. He sat up and checked the computer. Wind speed, 83 kilometers per hour. Temperature, minus 63 degrees. If someone were outside in that, they would not be knocking politely. They would be screaming. They would be dying. They would already be dead. Go to bed, he told himself. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. He did not sleep. By 3 in the morning, he had counted the rhythm so many times that it lived inside his skull. 3 small knocks. A pause of about 3 seconds. 3 more knocks. Then silence for about 20 seconds before it started again. It was too steady to be random, too careful to be weather. If it were a sensor banging against the wall, it would change with the wind. If it were ice, it would scrape or crack. This was a hand, or something that wanted to sound like one. Opening the door was not an option. Not in that wind, not in that cold. The protocol was clear. No unnecessary exterior movement in unsafe conditions. He had to wait. He had to rest if he could. He had to check in daylight, except there was no daylight anymore. He had to check when the wind dropped. The knocking continued for 11 hours. By the time the wind finally calmed enough for a safe walk outside, it was 2 in the afternoon. He had not slept. His eyes burned. His mind felt rubbed raw. Every time the knocking paused, hope rose in him. Every time it returned, that hope was crushed into something close to panic. He pulled on his gear carefully. Heavy boots, gloves, face covering, outer layers, emergency radio, rifle, military flashlight. He went through every step because the steps were there to save him. Then he opened the door. The knocking stopped. That was almost worse than hearing it continue. The outside darkness swallowed his flashlight beam. It reached only so far before the black took it apart. The cold hit him like a physical blow, but the wind was low enough to move. He stepped outside and shut the door behind him. For several minutes, he searched everything attached to the lab. Sensor arms, cables, exterior panels, weather equipment, anything that could have been striking the metal in that rhythm. He found nothing loose, nothing broken, nothing that could have knocked. And not once while he stood outside did the sound return. It was as if whatever had been knocking was satisfied that he had come out. He was turning back toward the door when his flashlight slid across the snow and stopped. At first, his mind refused to understand what he was seeing. Footprints. They were small compared to his huge boots. Neat, narrow prints, shaped like loafers. They stood directly in front of the door, toes facing the lab. One pair, perfectly pressed into the powder. He stared at them, breathing hard into his mask. Not possible, he thought. The wind from the night before would have erased prints in less than 2 minutes. These looked fresh, sharp, clean. His hand shook as he moved the flashlight to the left. The beam revealed more prints. Dozens, then hundreds. All the same shape, all facing the door. They surrounded the lab in silent rows, as if a crowd of people had been standing there in the dark, politely waiting for him to answer. At these wind speeds, he thought, they would have been covered almost instantly. A cold feeling rose inside his stomach that had nothing to do with the weather. They just left. He was back inside before he remembered deciding to run. He slammed the door, locked it, and backed away until he hit the opposite wall. His breath came fast and loud. He slid down to the floor with his back against the metal, staring at the door as if it might open by itself. His thoughts flew in every direction. If someone was outside, why only knock? How had they reached him? Why loafers? How many were there? Why stand silently outside all night? Why leave before he opened the door? Where could they go? There was nowhere to go. Knock, knock, knock. Pause, knock, knock, knock. He squeezed his eyes shut. I didn't hear that. Knock, knock, knock. Pause. Knock, knock, knock. Hello? He called. The word sounded insane as soon as it left his mouth. He was speaking to the black outside, asking it to answer him, waiting for something impossible to speak back. A voice came through the metal door. Hello, sir. May I have just a moment of your time on this lovely afternoon? The voice was cheerful, friendly, muffled by the heavy door, but clear enough. It sounded like a salesman at an electronics store, the kind of young man who smiled too much because a manager had trained him to. Bright, practiced, empty, the man scrambled to his feet. No. He had gone mad. That was the only answer. The isolation had broken him faster than anyone had warned. He needed to radio base. He needed emergency evacuation. He could not stay here another minute. He lunged toward the emergency radio. No need for that, sir. The voice called from the other side of the door. The man froze. The voice had known what he was doing. His hand shook so badly he almost dropped the handset. He pressed the red emergency button again and again. McMurdo Station to Lab 2309, he said, trying to sound calm and failing. Requesting emergency evacuation. Please acknowledge. Static. Only static. He waited, pressing the button, repeating the call. Nothing came back. May we have a proper introduction, sir? The voice asked. Open the door. The man turned slowly toward it. Who are you? That is not your immediate concern, is it? The cheerful voice replied. What are you? For a moment, there was only the wind. Then he heard snow crunch under a foot. Not one foot. Many, the sound repeated from every direction around the lab, as if thousands of people had taken one step forward at the exact same time. The cheerful tone changed. It became smug. Darker, still polite. But now the politeness felt like a mask splitting open. I can be anything you want me to be. The man stumbled toward the rifle, leaning against the wall. He grabbed it and aimed at the door, though he knew how useless it looked against the thing outside. I am armed, he shouted. You are trespassing on sanctioned American territory. Silence followed. Not normal silence. Total silence. Even the wind stopped. For a few seconds, the whole world seemed to hold its breath. Then, something enormous struck the north side of the container. The crash was so loud that he screamed without meaning to. The wall bent inward. Metal folded with a shriek. At the same time, the east and west walls dented near the top corners, as if giant fingers had gripped the lab from both sides. The man staggered backward and slammed into the far wall. The container groaned. The north side continued pushing inward, slow and steady, like the lab was being swallowed by a throat made of steel. Equipment crashed to the floor. The cot twisted against its bolts. The lights flickered. Just before the wall crushed fully inward, the pressure stopped. A wet sliding sound moved across the ceiling. Wet, that was the worst part. Not metal, not ice. Wet. The whole container rocked backward so violently that he thought it would roll over. He fell to the floor, curled around the rifle, and squeezed his eyes shut. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, he whispered, voice breaking, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. The voice outside laughed softly. If you saw God before you, it said, do you think your prayers would save you? The man opened his eyes. Above him, the ceiling began to cave in. The corners folded first, slow, careful. Something was gripping the roof and pressing down with impossible strength. The metal bent around invisible fingers. Screws popped. A light fixture burst and showered sparks onto the floor. He began another prayer, louder this time, sobbing through the words. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our The ceiling dropped another inch. He clutched the rifle to his chest like a child clutching a blanket. In his mind, he was not in Antarctica anymore. He was back on the porch. His mother's arms were around him. Her hand was on the back of his head. Her voice was in his ear, sharp and loving and alive. The lab screamed around him. The walls bent closer. The radio spat static. The darkness outside pressed its mouth against the glass porthole. Then the thing spoke again. This time, it used his mother's voice. Soft, angry, terrified, loving. It's dumber than hell. Story 2. This happened about a year or maybe 2 years ago, and even now I still think about it more than I want to admit. I have tried to explain it to myself in normal ways. I have told myself it was probably just some homeless person, or a fisherman, or maybe some weird teenager trying to scare people. I have told myself that the dark can make everything seem worse than it really is, especially when you are somewhere you should not be, doing something stupid with people who are also trying to act brave. But no matter how many normal explanations I try to give it, there is one thing I can never get past. Whoever that person was, they sat alone in the dark for hours, with no car, no friends, no real reason to be there, just holding a small blue-white light in the tall grass and watching us. At the time, I did not think the night was going to become anything worth remembering. It started like one of those dumb late-night plans that sounds exciting only because everyone is bored. It was me, my friend Joe, Joe's friend Michael, and another friend of theirs named Raven. The four of us had been driving around with no real plan, talking about places we had heard about, places people said were abandoned, haunted, dangerous, or just cool to explore at night. Somehow, the old dam in the Otay-Eastlake area came up. I had heard about it before, but I had never gone there at night. I knew there was water around it, rocks, trails, and a lot of empty space. People said there was graffiti down there, and that it was one of those places where teenagers went to drink, smoke, paint, and take creepy photos. It did not sound safe, exactly, but that was part of why everyone wanted to go. When you are with a group, especially late at night, you start acting like being scared is funny. Nobody wants to be the one who says, maybe we should just go home. So we went. By the time we got there, it was already really dark. Not regular dark, like a street with lamps and houses nearby, but open land dark. The kind of dark that makes everything beyond your flashlight feel endless. The only real lights were the city lights far away in the distance. They looked small and soft, like they belonged to another world. Behind us, those lights made everything feel a little less lonely. But in front of us, toward the dam, there was mostly blackness, rocks, brush, and the sound of moving water somewhere below. We parked our car near the trail, not too far from the pond area. I remember getting out and immediately feeling that cold night air against my face. It smelled like wet dirt, dry weeds, and old water. Nobody said much for the first few seconds. We just stood there, listening. The place had that heavy quiet that makes every little sound feel too loud. A jacket zipper, a shoe scraping rock, someone breathing through their nose, the soft buzz of insects. Far away, maybe a car on some road, but even that sounded distant and weak. Joe was the one acting the most excited. He kept saying we had to go down closer to the dam, that it looked way better from below. Michael was filming little parts on his phone, making jokes under his breath, like he was making some kind of found footage movie. Raven was laughing at him, but I could tell she was checking the darkness more than the rest of us. I was trying to seem calm, but I already had that weird feeling in my stomach. The kind you get when you know you are somewhere you probably should not be. We made our way down the rocks toward the wet area below the dam. The rocks were uneven and slick in some places, and we had to go slowly. A few times, one of us slipped and grabbed at another person's arm. There was water running over some parts, and the sound of it got louder the farther down we went. It echoed off the concrete in a way that made it hard to tell where it was coming from. Sometimes it sounded like it was right beside us. Sometimes it sounded like it was underneath us. When we finally got down there, I had to admit it looked cool. The dam rose above us like a huge dark wall, and the water moved around the rocks in little streams. The concrete was stained and cracked, with patches of graffiti and old marks from people who had been there before. The air was colder down there. It felt damp, like the whole place was sweating. Our phone lights moved over the walls and ground, catching little flashes of broken glass, wet stone, spray paint cans, and trash. For a while, we forgot to be scared. That happens when you first get to a place like that. The fear turns into excitement, because you are actually there. We climbed around, laughed, took pictures, and pointed our flashlights into dark spaces where the water disappeared. Joe kept saying, "This is sick," over and over. Michael threw a small rock into the water and made some dumb joke about waking up whatever lived down there. Raven told him to shut up, but she was smiling. Then we climbed to the other side of the dam and worked our way up toward the top. It took longer than I expected. The rocks were not easy, and in the dark, every step felt like it could be the wrong one. When we reached the top, we found this canal-like space on the other side. It was dry in parts and wet in others, with high concrete sides and a lot of graffiti. Some of the graffiti was bright and new, but some of it looked old and faded, like it had been there for years. There were spray paint cans lying around, some empty, some not. Michael picked one up and shook it. It rattled. We messed around there for a little while. Nothing serious, just stupid stuff. Someone sprayed a line on the concrete. Someone else tried to write something, but the can barely worked. We were laughing and talking too loudly, the way people do when they are trying to make the silence feel less powerful. Our voices bounced around the canal space and came back to us strange and thin. That was when we noticed the light. It was not close to us. It was down and away from the dam, across the pond, near the tall grass. At first, I thought it was a reflection from one of our phones, or maybe a light from a house far away. But then it moved. It was soft, bluish-white, almost like a lantern or a camping light. Not bright like a flashlight beam. It did not cut through the dark. It just glowed. It moved slowly from side to side, as if someone was holding it and gently swaying it around. It was strange because it seemed too low to be a streetlight and too steady to be someone walking. Whoever had it was sitting or crouching in the grass, not moving from that spot. We all saw it. I remember Joe saying something like, "What is that?" And Michael immediately trying to zoom in with his phone, but from where we were, the screen showed almost nothing. Just darkness and that small, pale light. At first, we joked about it. That was the dumbest part. We should have been creeped out right away, but instead we laughed because nobody wanted to admit how weird it was. Someone said it was probably a fisherman. Someone else said it was some guy getting high. Michael joked that it was a ghost. Joe yelled something like, "Hey!" from the top of the dam, and his voice carried over the water. The light did not answer. It only kept swaying. Looking back, I cannot believe we did not leave right then. The person was sitting in tall grass near the pond, maybe around 30 feet from where we had parked the car. They had no visible vehicle, no other light, no friend with them, no reason to be there at that hour. We could not see their face or body clearly. All we could see was that pale lantern-like glow moving slowly in the dark. I think part of why we did not panic was because they were far away from us at that moment. From up on the dam, distance makes things feel less real. The light looked like part of the scenery, like something we could talk about but did not have to deal with yet. It was only later, when we had to return toward the car, that it started feeling different. After a little more time, we decided to head back. It was getting late, and the fun had started wearing off. The cold was getting into my hands, and my shoes were wet. We climbed back down carefully, shining our lights at the rocks and warning each other where not to step. The whole time, I kept thinking about the light. I did not want to look at it too much, because I felt like if I looked, I might see it closer than before. When we got back near the lower area, Raven suddenly stopped. "My phone," she said. At first, we thought she meant she had dropped it right there, but then she started checking all her pockets in her bag. Her voice changed. She was not joking anymore. She had lost it somewhere between the canal and the rocks, maybe near the graffiti, maybe near the water, maybe all the way back on the other side. Nobody wanted to say it, but we all knew what that meant. We had to stay and look for it. So we did. For almost an hour, we searched that place in the dark. That hour felt much longer than it sounds. At first, we were organized. We retraced our steps and shined our lights over the ground. We checked the rocks, the concrete ledges, the canal space, the places where we had been messing with spray paint. We called the phone, but either it was dead, on silent, or somewhere the sound could not reach us. Raven was getting more upset, and the rest of us were getting more nervous. The longer we searched, the less fun the place felt. The water sounded louder. The darkness felt thicker. The graffiti started looking less like art and more like warnings. Every time one of us moved our light too fast, shadows jumped across the concrete. More than once, I thought I saw someone standing at the edge of my vision, only to turn and see a bush, a rock, or nothing at all. And always, in the back of my mind, was that little blue-white light across the pond. I do not remember exactly when we checked on it again, but I know we did. Maybe more than once. I remember one of us saying, "Is that person still there?" And all of us going quiet. The light was still in the grass, still low, still swaying a little. It had not moved away. It had not come closer either, at least not that we could prove. It was just there. That almost made it worse. If someone had walked toward us, we would have known to run. If someone had yelled back, we could have decided they were just some person. But this was different. Whoever it was seemed content to sit in complete darkness, alone, holding that little light, while four strangers climbed around an abandoned dam in the middle of the night. No music, no talking, no phone screen, no campfire, no car headlights. Just the light. At one point, Michael tried to make a joke again. He said maybe they were waiting for us to leave so they could murder us by the car. Nobody laughed much. Raven told him to stop. Joe said we were fine, but even he sounded like he did not fully believe it. We kept searching for the phone because we did not want Raven to lose it, but I think all of us started to understand that staying there was becoming a bad idea. The night had shifted. The place did not feel empty anymore. It felt watched. When we finally gave up, Raven was upset, but she agreed we had to leave. It was probably around 1 in the morning by then. Maybe later. Time felt weird out there. My legs hurt from climbing, and my hands were dirty from touching rocks and concrete. We started making our way back up toward the trail that led to the car. That was the worst part. Going back meant moving closer to where we had seen the light. The path did not go directly through the grass where the person was sitting, but it brought us back toward the area near the pond and the parking spot. Every step made me more aware of how exposed we were. There were no houses nearby, No people walking dogs. No traffic passing close enough to help. Just us, our phone lights, the dam behind us, and that dark open area ahead. I remember trying to listen for sounds from the grass. A cough, footsteps, breathing, anything. But the only things I heard were our shoes on dirt and rock, the water behind us, and insects in the weeds. I do not remember clearly if we saw the lantern when we got close to the car. That bothers me. Part of me thinks we did. I have this image in my head of the blue-white glow still sitting low in the brush, not far from the car, almost in the same place as before. But another part of me wonders if I only remember it that way because I was so scared by then. I know we were all creeped out. I know nobody was laughing anymore. I know we moved faster when the car came into view. And I know none of us wanted to talk loudly. That might be the detail that stays with me most. Earlier, we had yelled, joked, laughed, and made noise. But on the way back, we were quiet, without agreeing to be quiet. It was like everyone understood that the dark around us was listening. When we reached the car, there was this horrible moment where Joe fumbled with the keys. It probably lasted 2 seconds, but it felt like forever. I kept looking toward the tall grass, expecting the light to rise up. I imagined a person standing slowly, holding the lantern at their side. I imagined them walking toward us without a word. I imagined the soft glow getting closer, showing hands, then a face, then something worse than a face. But nothing happened. The car unlocked. We got in fast. Joe started it, and the engine sounded too loud in the quiet. The headlights came on and washed over the dirt and weeds in front of us. I looked toward the grass, trying to see who was there. I saw nothing clearly. Maybe the light was gone. Maybe it was hidden behind the brush. Maybe the person had lowered it. Maybe they were standing outside the reach of the headlights, watching us from just beyond where we could see. Nobody suggested getting out to check. Joe turned the car around, and we left. For the first few minutes, nobody said much. The road away from the dam felt longer than it had on the way in. Every bump made the car creak. Raven kept looking at her empty hands like she could not believe her phone was gone. Michael stared out the window. Joe drove faster than he needed to. Finally, someone said, "What the hell was that light?" No one had a good answer. A fisherman did not make sense. Who fishes alone in complete darkness with only a tiny blue lantern, sitting in tall grass near an abandoned dam at 1 a.m? A homeless person did not make much sense either. There was no blanket, no cart, no bags, no shelter, no fire. A regular person would have called out when we yelled. A regular person would have moved around. A regular person would not sit there for hours, silent and still, watching a group of people explore. The more we talked, the worse it felt. We realized the person had probably been there when we arrived. I think we might have noticed the light even when we first entered the site, but at the time it did not register as important. That means whoever it was had been sitting there before we got there, stayed there the entire time we climbed around the dam, stayed there while we searched for Raven's phone for nearly an hour, and was likely still there when we left. Hours, alone, in the dark, near our car, just watching. I do not know what happened to Raven's phone. We never found it. Maybe it fell between rocks, maybe it dropped into the water, maybe someone picked it up after we left. I do not like thinking about that last possibility, because sometimes I imagine the person in the grass waiting until our taillights disappeared, then standing up and walking to the exact place where the phone had fallen, as if they had known where it was the whole time. Sometimes I wonder if the phone was the reason we had to stay longer. That is probably just fear talking. I know that. But fear has a way of building stories in the spaces where facts are missing. The facts are simple. 4 of us went to an abandoned dam at night. We climbed around, messed with spray paint cans, and saw a strange blue-white light across the pond. The light seemed to be held by someone sitting in the tall grass near where we had parked. We joked about it because we were trying not to be scared. Then Raven lost her phone, and we stayed there searching for about an hour. The whole time, that person seemed to remain in the darkness, alone and silent. When we left around 1 in the morning, we were all scared enough that none of us wanted to get a closer look. That is all that happened. But sometimes, late at night, I still picture that little light. I picture it swaying slowly from side to side, not like someone waving hello, but like someone marking time. Waiting, patient, calm, I picture the tall grass moving around it. I picture a face behind it, hidden just far enough back that we could not see. I picture someone sitting there with no car, no reason, and no fear of the dark. And the part that bothers me most is not that they were there. It is that they never came closer. They never shouted. They never ran. They never tried to scare us away. They only watched, as if watching was all they had come there to do. Story 3. People say every human has 5 senses. We can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. But some people believe there is another sense, too. A 6th sense. The feeling that tells you when someone is watching you from behind. I always thought that idea was strange. I never believed in it. I thought people only said it because they got nervous in quiet places, or because their mind played tricks on them when they were alone. I used to laugh whenever someone said they could feel eyes on them. It sounded like something from an old ghost story. I do not laugh about it anymore. Not after what happened today. A few of my friends decided that going camping in the woods would be a good idea. They had been talking about it for weeks, saying we needed a break from the city, from work, from phones, from noise, from everything. They wanted fresh air, campfires, hiking, and a weekend where nobody had to think about real life. I liked nature, at least in theory. I liked looking at trees, rivers, and mountains in pictures. I liked sitting in parks when the sun was out. But the deep woods were different. There was something ugly hidden inside all that beauty. Something about the silence between trees always made me uneasy. The forest looked peaceful during the day, but at night it became something else. It became a place where anything could be hiding a few steps away from you, watching you breathe. My biggest fear was always being killed in some cabin in the middle of the woods late at night. I know that sounds very specific and maybe even ridiculous, but it was real to me. I had watched too many horror movies and read too many stories about people going into the woods and never coming back. Whenever someone mentioned camping, my mind went straight to broken windows, dark hallways, strange noises outside, and someone screaming where nobody could hear. So when my friends asked me to come, I almost said no. They teased me when I finally agreed. Matt laughed and told me I was acting like a character in a bad horror movie. Sam said I needed to face my fears and stop imagining monsters behind every tree. I tried to laugh along with them, but deep down I was already nervous. Still, I had nothing else to do that weekend. I told myself they were right. Maybe it was time to face the fear. Maybe one night in the woods would prove that I had been silly all along. I wish I had stayed home. We reached the cabin sometime in the evening. It stood in a small clearing, surrounded by tall trees that seemed to lean over it from every side. During daylight, it looked almost nice. Old, but nice. The wood walls were dark from years of rain. The porch creaked under our feet. There was a small pile of firewood near the door, and the windows reflected the gray sky like dull mirrors. The cabin had 2 floors. Downstairs, there was a living room, a bathroom, and 1 bedroom. Upstairs, there was one more room with two beds pushed against opposite walls. It was simple, but it had enough space for the three of us. After we unpacked, we decided not to do much that first night. The drive had been long and the air was already getting colder. We told ourselves we would sleep early, wake up fresh, and go camping properly the next day. We would hike, set up a fire, maybe explore the area around the cabin. That was the plan. Matt and I took the upstairs room. Sam said he was fine sleeping alone downstairs. I was secretly glad I did not have to sleep by myself. I would rather share a room with anyone than lie alone in the middle of the woods, listening to every tiny sound outside the window. The night became quiet very quickly. Not normal quiet, not peaceful quiet. It was the kind of quiet that feels too big. The kind of quiet where every little sound becomes sharp. The wind brushed against the cabin. Branches scraped lightly against the roof. Somewhere outside, leaves moved in the dark. Every now and then, the old wood of the cabin creaked, like it was shifting in its sleep. Matt fell asleep before me. I lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and trying to calm myself down. I told myself the cabin was safe. The doors were locked. Sam was downstairs. Matt was only a few feet away. There were no monsters. There were no killers. There was only the forest, and the forest was just trees. At some point, I finally fell asleep. I woke up later to the sound of something moving downstairs. At first, I thought I had imagined it. My eyes opened in the dark, and for a few seconds I did not remember where I was. Then I heard it again. A slow, heavy sound. Something was moving below us. I turned my head toward Matt's bed. He was awake too. His eyes were open, and even in the dark I could see he was listening. He lifted a finger to his lips, telling me not to make a sound. We both stayed still. The noise came again. It did not sound like a person walking. That had been my first thought. Maybe Sam had gotten up to use the bathroom. Maybe he was getting water or looking for something in his bag. But the sound was wrong for that. It was lower, heavier, uneven, like something with 4 legs was moving across the floor. Or maybe more than 4. A cold feeling spread through my stomach. The sounds moved slowly through the downstairs area. A scrape, a thump, a soft dragging noise. Then, another step. It sounded like something was sniffing around, exploring the cabin. Matt and I looked at each other without speaking. After a while, the noises stopped. The silence that followed felt worse. I do not know why I did what I did next. Maybe I wanted to prove I was not a coward. Maybe my brain was still half asleep. Maybe I thought that if I checked downstairs and saw nothing, I could go back to bed and pretend everything was normal. I got up. Matt grabbed my arm and shook his head, but I pulled away. I whispered that maybe a deer had somehow walked inside, though even as I said it, I knew how stupid it sounded. A deer does not open cabin doors. A deer does not move through a house in the middle of the night without breaking everything. Still, I stepped into the hallway and moved toward the stairs. The cabin was dark except for a little moonlight coming through the windows. Each step creaked under my feet. I moved slowly, one hand on the wall, trying not to make noise. When I reached the bottom, I whispered Sam's name. Sam? No answer. I called again, a little louder. Sam? Still nothing. I stood there, listening. The living room was messy from our bags and jackets, but nothing seemed to be moving. The bathroom door was open. The kitchen area was empty. I could not see anyone. I went to Sam's room and pushed the door open. His bed was empty. For a second, I just stared at the sheets. Sam was gone. I turned around, ready to run upstairs and get Matt. That was when I heard the scream. It came from upstairs. Matt's scream. It was not a normal scream. It was not a shout of surprise or fear. It was a deep, broken, gut-wrenching scream that sounded like pain and terror together. It ripped through the cabin and made my whole body freeze. Then something inside me snapped. I did not go upstairs. I did not help him. I ran. I threw open the front door and rushed out of the cabin into the woods. I did not think. I did not look back. I just ran through the darkness like something was chasing me. Branches hit my face. Roots caught at my feet. Leaves and mud slipped under my shoes. My lungs burned. My legs hurt. But I kept running. I ran until my feet ached and my chest felt like it was being crushed. Then, suddenly, I stopped. It was like waking up from a trance. I looked around and realized I was in the middle of the woods, completely alone. The cabin was nowhere in sight. The trees surrounded me from every direction, tall black shapes, all of them looking the same. The darkness between them felt endless. I had no flashlight in my hand, no backpack, no weapon. The only things I had were a few matches in my pocket and the clothes I was wearing. I laughed once, but it came out wrong. It was not real laughter. It was panic wearing a thin mask. My brain had stopped working. I sat down under a tree, breathing hard, and stared into the darkness. My whole body shook. I could still hear Matt's scream in my head, again and again. The sound would not leave me. Then I felt it. That strange feeling. The feeling that someone was watching me. I looked into the trees, but I saw nothing. I told myself it was my mind playing tricks on me. Of course I felt watched. I was alone in the woods after hearing my friend scream. Anyone would feel watched. Anyone would be scared. It did not mean something was there. I tried to collect myself. Then the real panic came. Whatever had been inside the cabin had probably killed Matt. That thought hit me so hard, I almost could not breathe. Matt was upstairs. Matt screamed. Then, nothing. I had left him there. I had run away. Maybe he was dead because I was too scared to help him. But what could have done it? Before we rented the cabin, Sam and I had asked the owner if there were bears in the area. He told us firmly that there were not. No bears, no large predators, nothing dangerous as long as we did not do anything stupid. But people make mistakes. Maybe he had been wrong. Maybe he had not checked properly. Maybe something had wandered in from another area. Still, none of that mattered right then. I needed help. I patted my pockets, searching frantically, and almost cried with relief when I felt my phone in my jacket pocket. I had grabbed it without even realizing when I went downstairs to check on Sam. It was zipped up safely inside. I pulled it out. The battery was at 10%. No signal. I tried calling 911 anyway. The call failed. I tried again. Failed. Again. Failed. I turned on the flashlight and pointed it at the trees. The beam cut through a small part of the darkness, but it did not help much. The woods looked the same in every direction. Tree trunks. Leaves, branches, shadows. I had no idea which way I had come from. I did not know where the cabin was. I did not know if I was walking toward safety or deeper into the forest, but standing still was no longer an option. I started walking. I checked the time. 2:54 a.m. That was when I felt it again. Someone was staring at me. I turned around fast and shone the flashlight behind me. Nothing, only trees. I stood there, breathing hard, listening, no footsteps. No growl. No movement. Maybe my body was betraying me. Maybe my fear had finally taken over. Maybe because my worst fear had come true, every shadow now looked alive. I told myself I was hyper-alert because of what had happened. That was all. Then a hand touched my shoulder. I nearly screamed. I spun around and almost dropped the phone. It was Sam. He stood behind me, breathing hard, holding a small torchlight in one hand. His face was pale, and there was dirt on his clothes. For a moment, I was so relieved that I almost hugged him. "What happened?" I whispered. He told me he had seen something moving outside in the woods earlier. He thought maybe it was an animal, so he decided to check. That was exactly the kind of stupid thing Sam would do. He said whatever it was ran away from him. When he finally decided to go back to the cabin, he realized he was lost. Then he saw my phone flashlight through the trees and made his way toward me. It was dumb. Very dumb. But Sam had always been the type of person who would chase something pointless in the middle of the night just because he was curious. I told him about Matt. I told him about the noises downstairs, the empty room, and the scream from upstairs. Sam did not believe me at first. He said I was probably panicking. He said maybe Matt had screamed because he heard me run out. He said we needed to go back to the cabin and check. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him I knew what I heard. But getting back to the cabin was more important than fighting with him. We needed shelter. We needed a better signal. We needed to find Matt if he was still alive. So I followed Sam. We walked through the trees for what felt like forever. I kept looking over my shoulder. Every few steps I felt that same pressure on the back of my neck. That same deep certainty that something was watching us from the dark. Then, we found the cabin. And we found Matt. His body was hanging from a tree nearby. For a second, my mind refused to understand what I was seeing. Matt hung there lifelessly, his body swaying slightly in the cold wind. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle. His arms hung loose at his sides. The beam from my phone shook across him, because my hand would not stop trembling. Sam screamed. Then, he ran. I could not believe what I was seeing, but I knew I had to follow him. Whatever had done this was still somewhere in the woods. It might have been watching us even then. I chased after Sam. I shouted his name, but he did not stop. Branches whipped against me. My lungs burned again. The ground was uneven, and I could barely see where I was stepping. Then my foot caught on something. I fell hard, twisting my ankle beneath me. Pain shot up my leg. I cried out and rolled onto my side. By the time I looked up, Sam was gone. His screams had faded. Then they stopped completely. I sat under a tree, clutching my ankle and trying not to make noise. The forest around me was silent again. Too silent. That was when I felt it again. Someone was watching me. This time, I trusted the feeling. I forced myself to stand, even though pain stabbed through my ankle. I turned back toward the direction of the cabin and began limping through the woods. Behind me, I heard a twig snap. I did not look back. Another snap. Then another. Something was moving behind me. I wanted to run, but my ankle would not let me. I could only limp forward, biting down on the inside of my cheek to stop myself from crying out. I kept my eyes on the weak light ahead, praying I was going the right way. The sounds followed me. Soft steps, cracking twigs, a low dragging noise. I did not turn around. I knew that if I saw whatever was behind me, I would lose whatever strength I had left. I only stopped when I reached the cabin. The front door was still open. I stumbled inside and slammed it shut behind me. The cabin was destroyed. The beautiful old place we had walked into earlier was now a wreck. Furniture had been thrown around the living room. Chairs were broken. Bags were ripped open. The walls were covered in deep claw marks, long and sharp, like something had dragged knives through the wood. The floor was scratched. A lamp lay shattered near the couch. Whatever this thing was, it had been inside. It had torn the place apart. I locked the door with shaking hands and backed away. Then I felt it again. Something was looking at me. Only this time, the feeling came with a sound. A whisper. Help. I froze. The voice was soft and weak. Help. It sounded like Sam. For one stupid second, hope took over. Maybe he had found his way back. Maybe he was hurt outside. Maybe he needed me. I opened the door. No one was there. Only cold air rushed inside, brushing past my face and making the hairs on my arms stand up. I slammed the door shut and locked it again. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the lock. Then I went upstairs. The room Matt and I had shared was a bloody mess. Blood covered the floor, the bed, and part of the wall. Our bags had been ripped open. Blankets were thrown everywhere. One of the bed frames was broken. There were scratches on the door, the walls, even the ceiling. I knew time was running out. I needed help now. I checked my phone again. For the first time, it had signal. A small wave of relief passed through me so strongly that I almost cried. Help was finally within reach. I took a deep breath and started dialing. That was when I heard the front door burst open downstairs. The sound shook the whole cabin. Whatever this thing was, it had come back. It had come to finish the job. I panicked and dropped to the floor. At first, I crawled under the bed. I called 911 again. Failed. I tried again. Failed. I could hear something moving downstairs, heavy footsteps. Slow, careful, the floorboards creaked beneath its weight. Then I heard it start climbing the stairs. One step, then another, then another. I realized hiding under the bed was the worst possible choice. If it came into the room, it would find me in seconds. There was a small storage space above part of the room, a tight, cramped area near the ceiling. I had noticed it earlier, but had not cared. Now it was the only place I could think of. I climbed up as quietly as I could, forcing myself into the small space. My ankle screamed with pain. I pulled myself inside, pressed my body into the corner, and tried not to breathe too loudly. Then I heard the sound I did not want to hear. The bedroom door broke open. Wood cracked and slammed against the wall. Something entered the room. I could hear it breathing, not like a person. The breaths were deep and wet, slow and heavy. It moved around the room, dragging something across the floor. I heard it sniffing. I heard claws scrape the wood. I heard it step near the bed, then away from it. It was searching for me. It would only take a few minutes before it found me. I knew that. There was nowhere to run. I could not fight it. My ankle was hurt. The windows were too far. The stairs were blocked. My phone was almost dead. I forgot how to breathe. I checked the screen one last time. 2% battery. No signal. The hope I had felt vanished. I did not know what else to do, so I started writing this. Maybe someone will find my phone. Maybe someone will know what happened to us. Maybe someone will understand that we did not leave, and we did not get lost, and we did not do this to each other. It is still in the room. It is still searching. I can hear it moving below me. I can hear its breathing closer now. It has stopped near the wall. I think it knows I am here. If you are reading this, then I am already dead. Story 4. A few days ago, my older sister Rosie stopped answering my texts and calls. At first, I tried not to worry. Rosie had always been stubborn, and she had a habit of disappearing when she did not want to explain herself. Sometimes she would ignore a message for 2 days, then send me some random TikTok at 3 in the morning like nothing had happened. That was just Rosie, dramatic, private, and always convinced that whatever she was doing made perfect sense. But this time felt different. Nearly a full week passed without a single word from her. No text, no missed call, no voice note. Not even one mediocre TikTok with the caption, "This is so you." For Rosie, that was strange enough to make my stomach tighten. I am the youngest sibling. I am 25, and Rosie is 28. But I have always felt weirdly responsible for her in some ways. Maybe it is because she acts older and younger at the same time. She can be confident, loud, and impossible to argue with, but then she will attach herself to something so completely that she forgets the rest of the world exists. When we were kids, it was TV shows. Then it was certain actors. Then singers. Then plants. Now, apparently, it was her new friends. She had moved into a new place with 3 roommates a few months earlier. They were all college friends of hers, though I had never met any of them in person. I had only heard stories, but Rosie talked about them so much that I felt like I knew them better than they knew themselves. Every dinner with Mom became a full report about what Kaz said, what Violet did, what Nate cooked, or how funny they all were when they were together. Rosie's face always changed when she talked about them. Her eyes would brighten and her smile would stretch wider than usual. Sometimes I wondered if the 4 of them were more than just friends, but I never asked. Rosie would only roll her eyes and tell me I was being weird. I had not visited her new house yet. Life got in the way. That is the easy way to say it. The harder truth is that I was going through some dark, depressive episodes around the time she had her housewarming party. I could barely get out of bed, let alone put on a decent outfit and pretend to be happy for my sister in a room full of strangers. Mom went, though. She spent 3 hours worrying about the gift she had bought Rosie. It was an exotic plant she found online. She kept asking me if it was too small, too strange, too plain, too hard to care for. She wanted it to be perfect. From what she told me afterward, everyone else had given Rosie expensive silverware, fancy glasses, paperweights, and other grown-up housewarming gifts that looked good on a shelf but meant nothing to her. Mom's plant was the right choice. Rosie loved plants. She had always loved them, but I did not understand how deep that obsession had gone until I stood on her doorstep and found myself face to face with an overgrown lily that stabbed me in the forehead with one of its leaves. Her house was small, too small for a real flower garden. There was no proper yard out front, only a narrow concrete path leading to the door. But someone had planted flowers in the cracks between the concrete slabs. Tiny blooms pushed through broken gray stone, spreading in messy patches beneath my shoes. I almost felt guilty stepping on them. The house itself looked like it was being swallowed. Vines crawled along the doorframe, twisting through the gaps in the wood. They climbed up the walls and curled around the windows. Leaves pressed against the glass from inside, making it hard to see through. The place looked less like a home and more like something nature had found abandoned and decided to reclaim. I knocked on the door, trying to swallow the nervous lump in my throat. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then I heard movement inside. A soft drag. A creak. Something brushing against the door. When it finally opened, it did not swing wide. It cracked open just enough for someone to look out. The smell hit me first. It was strong. Too strong. Sweet, damp, earthy, and rotten all at once. It poured into my face and filled my nose, clinging to the back of my throat until I nearly gagged. It smelled like flowers left too long in dirty water, like wet soil, like a greenhouse on a hot day, and something beneath it that reminded me of old fruit going soft. But the worst part was that it was not only disgusting, it was tempting. Some part of me wanted to breathe it in deeper. It teased my lungs, pulling at me, asking me to take one full breath and let it fill me completely. I had to force myself not to lean toward it. The guy standing behind the door looked close to my age, maybe mid-20s. His sandy hair was a greasy, tangled mess, like he had run his fingers through it so many times that it had given up trying to fall normally. Small daisies were caught in his hair, sitting around his head like a ruined flower crown. Rosie had described him as having plant boy energy. At the time, I thought she was being dramatic. Now, looking at him, I had to agree, though not in the cute way she had probably meant. Yes, he had flowers in his hair. Yes, he had that strange, soft smile people get when they think they are more interesting than everyone else. But he was filthy. His short-sleeved shirt might have been white once, but now it was not any color at all. It was stained with dirt, sweat, and something darker. The fabric stuck to his clammy skin. I could not tell if he had showered in weeks or months. A fly buzzed around his face, and he swatted at it lazily, like he was used to them. Then I looked down. He was barefoot. Dirt was caked between his toes and under his nails. He swayed slightly as he held the door, like he was high or half asleep. His pupils were wide, too wide, swallowing most of the color in his eyes. High on the smell, maybe, high enough to forget he was supposed to bathe. I forced myself to speak. My hands were already sweaty. "Hi," I said, trying not to stare at his feet. "I'm Posey." His smile widened. I froze. Posey was my childhood nickname. Rosie used to call me that when we were little because our mother thought it was cute to give us flower names. Rosie and Poppy. Then Rosie decided Poppy sounded too serious and started calling me Posey. Nobody outside my family used it. The guy said it like he had known me for years. His voice was smooth, almost musical, which made the whole thing worse. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle he was not sure he wanted to solve. I cannot explain how I knew, but I understood in that moment that this man did not like me. His smile looked friendly enough, but there was something fake and sharp underneath it. He looked me up and down like he was judging my clothes, my face, my breathing, all while standing there covered in dirt like something that had crawled out of a grave. "You're Rosie's older sister," he said. "Poppy," I corrected. "And I'm her younger sister." His smile did not move. "Interesting choice of name. I didn't choose it," I said. "Can I talk to my sister?" He shrugged. "She's not available right now." I took a slow breath and tried to be patient. "Can I come in?" "It's Kaz. I didn't ask." His mouth curved into a smirk. "It's common courtesy. Can I just see my sister?" I asked, already losing patience. "Please?" Kaz rolled his eyes and sighed like I had asked him to carry a sofa upstairs. But then I'd have to climb the stairs. I stared at him. "You're in your mid-20s, exactly," he said. "Halfway to 30, can I see my sister?" "She's tied up with something." That choice of words sat wrong in my mind, but I pushed past it. "Okay," I said slowly. "Then, can I come in and see her myself?" Kaz leaned a little harder against the doorframe. "We have a lot of plants." "I know, you may eat, get overwhelmed. I'm fine," I said. "I can deal with a few flowers." Something in his face changed. For a second, the mocking expression cracked, and a real smile came through. It was sudden and bright, almost childish. The word flowers had done something to him. It was like I had said the name of someone he loved. "Do you like flowers?" he asked. I did not answer. Kaz straightened up, then gave a mocking little bow and waved me inside. "Come on in," he said. "But don't say I didn't warn you." He winked, still smiling that irritating smile. I hesitated for one last second. Then he turned and danced backward into the hallway, bare feet disappearing into the green shadows of the house. I followed. The door slammed behind me, and I jumped. Kaz laughed and said something about a faulty hinge, but his eyes found mine like he was pleased that I had flinched. He had been right about one thing. I was overwhelmed immediately. There was green everywhere. Leaves pressed against my face. Vines brushed my arms. Stems hung from the ceiling and tangled in my hair. I had to push through overgrown leaves just to follow Kaz down the hallway. Flowering buds grew through cracks in the floorboards, and I tripped over them twice before catching myself against the wall. The wall was damp. My sister and her roommates had not decorated their house with plants. They had surrendered the house to them. It was more suited for plants than humans. I moved slowly, taking in everything around me. Flowers, small trees, mushrooms, thick vines, strange little plants with purple leaves, hanging moss, curling roots. Anything that could grow, Rosie seemed to have grown. Or maybe the house had grown it for her. The hallway looked like a miniature rainforest. A spider crawled across my arm, and I brushed it away with a sharp gasp. The deeper I went, the more obvious it became that Rosie's plant obsession had gone far beyond cute or quirky. This was not a hobby anymore. This was not even messy. This was sickness. Kaz did not seem bothered by any of it. He moved through the dirt-caked carpet and sticky leaves like he belonged there. Spiderwebs clung to the walls, dust gathered in heavy patches, and black soil had been ground into almost every surface. He led me into what must have been the kitchen, though it barely looked like one anymore. There was a refrigerator and an oven, but both were coated in dirt. Vines hung from the ceiling in thick curtains. Leaves pushed out from the walls. Roots crawled over the counters. I had no idea how anyone cooked in there. I was standing under a giant sunflower growing from the ceiling, its head turned down toward us like it was watching. The floor tiles had been ripped up in places and replaced with fresh soil. Kaz gave me a tour like this was normal. Somehow, it got worse. He told me the upstairs was out of bounds, but I could see the staircase from where I stood, and that was enough. Whatever had started downstairs had spread up there, too. Greenery crawled over the steps and wrapped around the railing. Thick vines had tangled through the furniture, climbed the walls, and spiderwebbed across the ceiling. Kaz was a surprisingly patient tour guide. He stopped at every plant, named it perfectly, and told me where it came from. He knew which flowers needed more sun, which liked shade, which were poisonous, which were rare, and which ones Rosie loved most. I did not care about any of that. I wanted my sister. He led me into the living room, which was also suffocating under plants. I was almost sure they had planted real grass inside. It grew across the floor in uneven patches, surrounding strangely colored flowers blooming from every corner. There was still something that looked like a living space. A shabby couch sat in front of a dusty television screen. The couch cushions had soil on them. A vine had curled around one of the legs and pulled it slightly crooked. A girl in yellow knelt in front of the window. She was sitting in the full afternoon sunlight with her head tipped back and her eyes closed. Dark brown curls flowed down her back, tangled with roses. The yellow came from her dress, though it was so faded and dirty that it looked more like an old curtain wrapped around her thin body. She was beautiful in a strange way, not in the polished way people are beautiful online. Her nose was sharp and angular, and when her lips parted, I saw crooked teeth. But somehow, inside that room, surrounded by flowers and sun, she fit perfectly. She looked like one of the plants that decided to become a person. Then I looked closer, and my stomach twisted. She was filthy, too. Her hair was matted. Her dress clung to her skin like she had been wearing it for days, maybe weeks. It looked like the fabric had started to become part of her. Kaz, she sighed, her voice soft with a British accent. Her eyes flickered open for a moment, and a smile touched her lips. She leaned into the sunlight as if it was touching her. Thin streaks of light crossed her cheeks, and she giggled quietly to herself. "Darling," she said, "didn't I tell you to stop picking up strays?" Several flies buzzed around her face. One crawled across her cheek and near her mouth. Another slipped between her lips for half a second before flying out again. She did not react. Her smile only grew. Kaz leaned against the wall with his arms folded. "That's Violet," he told me. "She's usually here getting her daily fix." He turned back toward the window, and for the first time since opening the door, he looked truly happy. The sunlight fell across his dirty face, and his expression softened. "It's a house tradition," he said. "Every morning we gather here and soak up the sunrise." I did not know what to say. "Cool," I managed. For a moment, I think they expected me to join them. Kaz stepped closer to the window and into the direct sunlight. He tipped his head back slowly and closed his eyes. His chest rose with a long breath, and his whole body relaxed, like the light was sinking into his bones. Violet smiled wider. They both looked peaceful. For one strange second, I felt the urge to stand with them. The smell in the air was thick, and the sunlight looked warm. They looked happy. Whatever this was, it seemed to pull them away from normal life and into something soft and bright. I felt myself smiling. Then, I caught myself. These people were filthy. Their house was dangerous. The smell was making it hard to think. I was almost certain they were high on the constant flow of flowers, rot, and sunlight, choking whatever part of their brains still understood basic human behavior. And I was starting to fall for it, too. My body knew before my mind did. Panic curled inside me, sliding through my chest and into my throat. "Kaz," I said when he led me outside. "Hmm?" He was cupping a purple rose in both hands, showing it to me like a treasure. I wanted to say, "This is weird. This is really, really weird," but I did not. Their tiny backyard had a greenhouse. That should not have surprised me. The whole house was basically a greenhouse already. The backyard was packed with rows of the same plant, over and over, filling almost every inch of space. Kaz moved through the dirt comfortably. His bare feet sank into the soil as he went from plant to plant, watering each one with careful attention. He treated them like children. He spoke to them softly. He brushed dirt away from leaves. He checked stems and adjusted pots. When he finished, he picked up the hose and sprayed water over himself. Then he tilted his head back and drank directly from the nozzle, gulping like an animal. He tossed the hose toward me while it was still sputtering water. "Want some?" he asked, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "It's fresh." That was the moment I decided I was done. Kaz was in love with this, with the flowers, the dirt, the sunlight, the life they had built. Somehow, in loving it, he had forgotten he was human. Rosie was insane for living in this place. I was going to find her, and I was getting her out. "Where's your bathroom?" I asked, forcing a small smile. I was already backing away. Kaz did not seem to notice. He had knelt in front of a patch of soil and was digging a fresh hole with his hands. "Bathroom is upstairs on your left," he said in a low hum. I did not wait for more instructions. I hurried back inside. Violet was still in the living room, sitting in the sunlight. But when I passed the doorway, I saw that she had taken off the top of her dress, or pulled it down. Something thin and green was growing from her left breast, curling around her skin and trailing toward her stomach. I started running. "Rosie?" I called, my voice catching in my throat. I reached for my phone, but it slipped from my sweaty hands and hit the floor. I snatched it up and kept moving. "Rosie." The stairs were almost impossible to climb. Vines twisted over the steps. Flowers brushed my ankles. Leaves slapped against my legs. I pushed through them and reached the second-floor hallway, breathing hard. There were 6 rooms up there. 2 were completely blocked by thick greenery, as if the plants had sealed them shut. The hallway smelled even stronger than downstairs. Sweet, wet, and rotten. My head felt light. I moved toward the bathroom door on the left. Vines and flowers covered it, physically blocking the frame. I grabbed handfuls of leaves and pulled them aside, ignoring the way thorns scratched my fingers. When I finally shoved the door open, branches whipped across my face and tangled in my hair. The bathroom was almost normal compared to the rest of the house. Almost, I could still see the bathtub and toilet. But both were full of dirt and being used as giant plant pots. Large pink flowering buds, almost the size of my torso, climbed up the walls and across the tiles. One of the buds twitched. I stepped forward, tripping over what I thought were vines poking out of the bathroom floor. Then I looked down properly. They were not vines. Something inside me broke open. My hand rose to my mouth before my brain fully understood what I was seeing. A scream climbed up my throat, but my palm trapped it there. There was a body on the floor. It was wrapped in a silky white lining, almost like a cocoon. Thick, sandy hair sprouted from a decomposing skull. The legs were curled inward, making the body look almost like a fetus. I dropped to my knees beside him. Kaz, his name came out muffled against my hand. I wanted to believe he was alive. I wanted to believe I was wrong. But when I rolled him onto his back, I immediately threw up. Vomit burned my throat and splattered onto the tiles. Kaz was dead. Not just dead. Decorated, his eyes had been removed, and dandelions had been planted in their place. His teeth were tangled with thin vines, curling between them like roots. His chest had been opened with terrifying care. His organs were gone, carved out as neatly as if a surgeon had done it, and flowers had been placed where they should have been. Where his heart had been, a blooming rose sat inside his ribs. Its stem twisted through his rib cage and flowered down into the empty space where his intestines should have been. The worst part was his smile. Even with no eyes, no life, and flowers growing out of him, Kaz was still smiling. I tried to push his body onto its front, some useless attempt at respect, but he would not move. His whole body was bound to the tiles by roots and thin white threads. Then the thought hit me so hard I almost fell backward. If Kaz was dead in front of me, who had opened the door? Who had led me through the house? Who had smiled at me? I scrambled to my feet and grabbed the bathroom door. The large bud on the wall twitched again. This time, it opened. A human face pushed through the writhing petals. Then, another. The first was a guy I guessed had to be Nate, the third roommate Rosie had talked about. The flower seemed to be trying to spit him out, but his body was trapped in sticky white substance. He looked about my age, with dark brown hair and faint laugh lines around his mouth. He must have been the joker of the group. For 1 second, I thought he was only unconscious. Then, I saw his stomach. It had been hollowed out, just like Kaz's, and filled with blooming flowers. The second face slid through the petals next, slick with the same white substance. I knew her before I wanted to. Dark blonde curls tied into that stupid ponytail. The little butterfly tattoo on her cheek. The one she got last year, even though Mom said she would regret it. Rosie, my sister's eyes were closed. Tiny pink flowers had wrapped around her pupils. Her cheeks were gray, drained of color. A cruel green tint had spread across her face and down her neck, tangled in her veins like a sickness. I knew she was dead. I knew it. And still my eyes moved lower. Her stomach was swollen. Pregnant. But Rosie could not get pregnant. When she was younger, her period pain had been so severe she ended up in the emergency room more than once. Eventually, she had surgery. Her womb had been removed. She could never have children. So how was her stomach moving? I stared at the bulge stretching her skin. Something inside it shifted. When I took one step forward, green vines wrapped around Rosie's stomach like protective hands, guarding whatever was growing inside. My gaze flicked to Nate, then to Kaz. Both of them had been hollowed out and filled with flowers. Rosie had not been the first try. She had been the success. The bodies were not just being decorated, they were being used, changed, filled. Maybe the spores had entered them. Maybe the plants had planted themselves inside human flesh and tried again and again until something took root. I backed toward the door. My hands closed around the handle. Posey? Kaz's voice behind me sent my heart into my throat. I turned. The thing standing in the doorway wore Kaz's face, but now I knew it was not him. It had copied him perfectly enough to trick me from a distance, but up close, the wrongness was everywhere. His skin shifted slightly, as if something underneath was moving through every mimic bone. When he tilted his head, a small pink flower bloomed from his right eye and slowly took it over. The plants around us rustled, not from wind, from excitement. The buds holding Rosie and Nate pulsed. Leaves scraped along the wall. Roots moved under the tiles. It sounded like the whole house was laughing. Kaz opened his mouth. Blood-stained petals slipped over his lower lip and fell onto his chin. I broke. I threw myself at him, trying to get past. He grabbed me, and his fingers were slimy and cold, too long now, bending wrong around my arm. I screamed and slammed his head into the floor. Once he shrieked like an animal. I slammed it again. Blood and thick slime burst from his mouth and nose. The cry that came out of him did not come from one body. It came from the walls, the ceiling, the vines, the buds, the whole house. Downstairs, Violet screamed with him. The thing holding Rosie echoed the sound, and my sister's body dropped from the flower onto the bathroom floor with a wet thud. A loud, beautiful, awful wail filled the house. It was so powerful I had to fold in on myself and cover my head. Kaz dropped to his knees, still moving, but clearly in pain. For one brief second, his hands lifted to his skull, clawing at the greenery sprouting from it. Then his arms fell limp. I hate myself for what I did next. I did not drag Rosie out. I did not even try. She was dead, and I could not make myself touch what was left of her. I could not carry her. I could not risk letting the vines catch me. I ran. I ran down the hallway, down the stairs, through the green, choking walls of that house. Leaves grabbed at my clothes. Thorns tore my skin. Something brushed the back of my neck, and I screamed harder. I did not stop until I was halfway down the street, sobbing into my hands while people stared from their windows. I went home. For the next few days, I said nothing. I showered again and again, scrubbing my skin until it was red and raw. I washed my hair until my scalp burned. I cleaned under my fingernails until they bled. But no matter how much soap I used, I could still smell that house. Flowers, wet soil. Rot, sunlight. 2 days ago, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror and felt a sharp pain in my back. I turned and saw something poking through the skin near my spine. A thorn. I reached back, gripped it between shaking fingers, and pulled. Half of a tangled rose slid out of my body. I screamed so hard my throat hurt. Later, in the bathroom at work, I lifted my shirt and found tiny buds growing on my breast. Pale green stems pressed beneath my skin like veins. Small roots had started to push from under one fingernail. That was when I broke. I told Mom everything. I sat at her kitchen table, shaking and crying, and showed her what was growing on me. I plucked tangled roots from my fingernails and dropped them in front of her. They twitched on the table like worms. Rosie is dead, I shrieked. Mom, Rosie is dead. Mom did not speak at first. She only sat there with her hands wrapped around her coffee mug. Then She reached across the table and calmly pulled a petal from my hair. "That young man was a bad influence," she said at last. I stared at her. "When I first visited them, I could tell those children were making foolish choices," she continued. "Adults, all of them, and still behaving like they had no sense." "Mom," I whispered. "Kaz and your sister argued a lot," she said, like I had not spoken. "And the other two?" Violet was a former pregnant teenager, and Nate had been in juvenile detention. She said it with disgust, like those things explained everything. Then her expression softened into something dreamy. "But there are good things growing in that house," Mom said. She reached out and played with my hair. "Good people, Posey." I pushed back from the table so fast the chair nearly fell. I grabbed my bag and left before she could say anything else. But I still hear her voice in my head. Even now, hiding where I hope she cannot find me, I can feel her eyes on me. I can still see the way she looked at the flowers growing from my skin. Not with horror, not with fear, with longing, with pride, like she was waiting for something to bloom. And her last words keep repeating in my mind. Besides, my mother said with a soft chuckle, and I swear I saw tiny threads of green under her fingernails, "I'm going to be a grandma." Story 5. I was sitting in the hall like I always did, drawing on the floor with my papers spread around me. My elder brother was sitting in front of me at the table, writing like he always did. His head was bent low, his fingers moving quickly across the page, as if the words were running away and he had to catch them before they disappeared. "There are some papers in my cupboard upstairs," he said without looking up. He held out a bunch of keys toward me. "Can you bring them?" I looked down at my drawing. I had only finished the outline, and I still needed to color it. "But I have to color this too." "Do it when you come back," he said calmly. I sighed and took the keys from his hand. The metal felt cold and heavy in my palm. There were so many keys on the ring that they clicked together with every step I took. I did not know why my brother needed so many keys when his room was always such a mess. The truth was, he hardly went into his own room. Most of his things stayed locked away, forgotten under dust, like memories he did not want to touch. I climbed the stairs slowly, telling myself there was nothing to worry about. It was only a room. It was only a cupboard. I could do this. When I reached his door, I stopped for a moment and looked at the handle. The hallway upstairs was quieter than the rest of the house. It always felt a little colder there, as if the sunlight from downstairs did not fully reach it. I took a breath, turned the handle, and pushed. The door did not open. Something was blocking it from the other side. I frowned and pushed harder. At first, it only moved a little, scraping against whatever was behind it. Then, with a rough groan, the door opened a narrow crack. A thick gust of dust rushed out and fell over my face and hair. I sneezed. Then I coughed. My eyes watered, and I rubbed at them with the back of my hand. Dust stuck to my fingers and made my skin feel dry and gritty. When I opened my eyes again, the door was wide enough for me to slip through. I stepped inside. The room smelled old, not just dusty, but closed up, like air that had been trapped for years. The moment I entered, mice scattered across the floor and vanished behind piles of books. Cobwebs hung from the walls and corners like torn curtains. Books lay open on the floor, their pages bent and yellow. Crumpled balls of paper were thrown everywhere, under the bed, near the desk, beside the window. His bed was unmade, the blanket twisted and half hanging off the side. Beside the bed stood the cupboard. It was tall, rusty, and old, with 2 heavy doors. The metal had dark stains on it, and the handles looked like they had not been touched in a long time. It made me wonder why my brother kept things after they became so old. He never threw anything away. He kept broken pens, dry paint, torn notebooks, old school papers, and things no one else would care about. Brother really does not throw anything away, I whispered to myself. I went to the cupboard and began trying the keys one by one. The first key did not fit. The second one went in halfway, then stuck. The third was too small. I kept trying, listening to the keys click and scrape in the lock. At last, one key slid in perfectly. I turned it with some force. The lock resisted at first, then gave a sharp click. I grabbed the handle and pulled. The cupboard groaned. The sound was long and painful, like something waking up after many years. The doors opened only a little before the papers inside pushed against them from the other side. Then, all at once, the doors burst wide open. Books, loose papers, notebooks, and old drawings poured out. They did not simply fall. They flew. The papers surrounded me like a storm of white wings. Pages slapped against my face and arms. Notebooks hit my chest. Loose sheets wrapped around my body. I stumbled backward, but the floor seemed to move under me. Then it vanished completely. For a moment, there was only paper, dust, and the sound of pages turning very fast. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the edge of a cliff. I did not move at first. My heart was beating so hard that I could feel it in my ears. The air around me smelled strange. It was dusty, like the cupboard, but also waxy and organic, like crayons mixed with wet soil. Slowly, I pushed myself up and looked around. Before me was a world I had never seen before. Below the cliff, there were houses of every color. Red roofs, yellow walls, blue windows, green doors, and purple chimneys. They looked like houses from a picture book, bright and simple, yet somehow alive. The roads curved like they had been drawn by hand. Trees had round leaves and twisted trunks. Even the sun looked flat and golden, as if someone had painted it in the sky. People walked through the streets, but they did not look like normal people. Some were short and round, some were tall and thin. Some had pointed hats, strange coats, painted faces, and eyes too large for their heads. They looked like cartoons, but they moved and spoke like living beings. I found a path leading down from the cliff. My legs were shaking as I followed it, but there was nowhere else to go. When I reached the road below, everyone stopped and stared at me. A small man with a long beard and big clear eyes came closer. He looked at me with surprise, then hope. "Can you create us too?" he asked. I blinked. "What? Can you create people?" he asked again. "I do not understand. There is someone like you," the dwarf said. "A person from outside. He created us." My chest tightened. "Someone like me? Who is he?" The dwarf did not answer at once. He only pointed toward a large house in the distance. Then he led me to a strange vehicle that looked as if it had been made from cardboard. It smelled like paper and glue. The wheels turned with a soft scraping sound, and the whole thing rocked as it moved. The dwarf drove me through the colorful town. Everyone kept staring. Children hid behind doors. Tall cartoon-like people leaned out of windows. A woman with a square head and a red dress whispered something to a man with green hair. It felt like the entire world had been waiting for me, though I did not know why. Finally, the vehicle stopped in front of the large house. A boy was standing there, painting the walls. He looked human. He wore a white cloak, but it was covered in stains of every color. Blue, red, yellow, green, black, and gold marked the fabric like memories of all the things he had created. He held a brush in one hand and was carefully adding color to one side of the house. Before the dwarf left, he called out, "Hey, look here. I found someone like you." The boy turned. For a moment, we only stared at each other. He climbed down from the ladder and walked toward me. He looked a little older than me, maybe around my brother's age when he was younger. His eyes were tired, but there was a strange light in them, like he had seen too many things, but still wanted to make more. "Hey," he said softly, "how did you end up here?" "I do not know," I replied. "I was in my brother's room. I opened his cupboard, and then I came here." His eyes sharpened. "So you are an artist too?" I looked away. "I like to draw." He smiled a little and handed me a pencil. "Then show me. Make something. What should I make?" "Anything." I held the pencil and felt suddenly nervous. This place did not feel like a dream anymore. It felt real in a way I could not explain. I looked at the empty air in front of me and started drawing a fruit basket. I drew apples, bananas, grapes, and oranges. Then I colored them carefully. The moment I finished, the air shimmered. The fruit basket appeared in front of us. It was real. The wood of the basket was rough under my fingers. The fruit smelled sweet. The boy picked up an apple, wiped it on his cloak, and took a bite. "You are very useful," he said with his mouth full. "Come with me." He took me to a riverbank outside the town. The water there was clear and bright, unlike any river I had seen before. It flowed smoothly, carrying tiny sparks of color in its current. The breeze was pleasant. Colorful birds flew above us, leaving faint trails of paint in the air. The sky was perfectly blue, too perfect, like it had just been finished. I sat beside him and looked around. "What kind of place is this?" I asked. "This place was created by me," he said. "Every little thing here. The houses, the trees, the river, even the people. I created all of it." "How?" He lifted his brush. "With this, just like you created the fruit basket with the pencil. I created this whole world, piece by piece." I swallowed. "So this is not the real world?" "No," he said. "You already know that," I nodded slowly. I did know. Somehow, I had known from the moment I woke up on the cliff. But hearing him say it made the world feel thinner, like a painting stretched over something dark. He stared at the river. His voice became quieter. "I made my own little world," he said. "A world away from noise, away from trouble, away from people who did not understand. I keep building it, because here, I can make things the way I want." "But why?" I asked. "Because I like to create," his answer was simple. But there was tiredness underneath it. I could hear it clearly. "Do you ever feel like leaving the real world completely?" I asked. He gave a weak laugh. "Who is keeping me here? I can leave whenever I want. Then how do I leave?" "When the time comes," he said calmly, "you will leave on your own." Before I could ask what that meant, the river split open. A giant fish burst out of the water and landed on the bank in front of us. It stood on 2 feet. Water streamed from its scales, and its round eyes were full of panic. "Master," it cried, "the colors of Watery Village are fading." The boy jumped to his feet. "What?" "The houses, the trees, the roads, everything is losing color. I have to get there now," he said. He took his pencil and quickly drew a car in the air. It appeared at once, small and bright, but I looked toward the distant hills and knew it would take too long. I grabbed the pencil from him. "We need something faster," I said. I began drawing a horse, but not an ordinary one. I gave it strong legs, a wide chest, and large wings. When I colored the last feather, the horse appeared before us, breathing softly through its nose. The boy stared at it, surprised. "This will get us there on time," I said. He climbed onto the horse first, and I sat behind him. The winged horse beat its wings once, twice, and then lifted us into the sky. We flew over the river and across the painted land. From above, the world looked even more beautiful. Villages were shaped like circles and stars. Roads curled between hills. Trees grew in colors no real tree should have. But then I noticed something that did not belong. Several hills had deep claw marks carved into their sides. The marks were huge. They had torn through grass, soil, and stone, leaving dark wounds in the land. "What happened there?" I asked. The boy stiffened. For a few seconds, he did not answer. Then he looked away. Nothing important, but his voice did not sound calm anymore. Before I could ask again, the sky changed. Black clouds rolled in from nowhere, swallowing the bright blue. Lightning flashed. The air grew cold. The winged horse cried out beneath us. Then 3 dragons tore through the clouds. The first dragon was blue. Its scales shone like dark ice, and its eyes burned with cold anger. It flew straight toward us, opening its jaws. "Stop wasting time with these childish colors." It thundered. The second dragon was green. It swept low over the land, smashing painted houses beneath its claws. People screamed and ran as roofs broke apart and walls collapsed. "This useless junk belongs in the trash." It hissed. The third dragon was purple. It curled around a cloud like a snake and laughed down at us. "Look at him," it sneered. Still pretending these scribbles matter, the boy's face went pale. "They are back," he whispered. I turned to him. "Who are they?" His jaw tightened. The people who taught me that creation was something to be ashamed of. I stared at the dragons as they circled above us. "Are these dragons your family?" "Not literally," he said. "In the real world, they are people, but in my world, they look like this." The green dragon landed in the middle of a painted village and crushed a row of houses beneath its feet. "They will destroy your world," I said. "Won't you stop them?" His hands shook on the horse's mane. "I can't, but you should try at least once, How?" he asked, and for the first time, he sounded like a child. I took the pencil and began drawing in the air. My hand moved quickly. I drew wings first, then claws, then horns, then a long black body covered in sharp scales. I added fire inside its mouth. In a few moments, a large black dragon formed in the sky. It roared and flew at the 3 dragons, breathing fire. The flames struck the blue dragon's wing and forced it back. The green dragon hissed and clawed at the air. The purple dragon laughed, but its laugh changed when my dragon attacked. For one moment, I thought we had a chance. Then, the 3 dragons began to change. Their bodies twisted and folded into one another. Blue, green, and purple scales melted together. Wings cracked and merged. Their necks stretched upward until one enormous body stood in the sky with 3 heads. The 3-headed dragon opened all its mouths at once. One head breathed fire. One spat water like a flood. One released lightning. The blast struck my black dragon and burned it away in seconds. It broke apart into ash and ink, falling through the sky like torn paper. Then the 3-headed dragon turned toward us. Its 6 eyes locked on to the winged horse. It lunged. I drew a jetpack as fast as I could. The moment it appeared, I grabbed the boy and pulled him away from the horse. We shot upward just as the dragon's jaws closed around the poor creature. The horse vanished between its teeth. I pushed the jetpack harder, flying between 2 narrow mountains. The dragon tried to follow, but its huge body could not fit through the gap. Its head snapped and roared behind us, shaking the stones. We burst through a wall of clouds. On the other side, a giant stood before us. He was taller than the mountains. His face was old and kind, with deep lines around his eyes. His beard fell like a waterfall down his chest. He looked down at us, and I felt so small that I nearly forgot how to breathe. "Do not be afraid," the boy said. "That is my grandfather. He is the only one who praises my art." Before I could ask what he meant, the giant opened his mouth. I tried to stop the jetpack. I tried to turn away. but the air pulled us forward. We fell into darkness. Inside that darkness, I heard distant sounds, buildings breaking, people screaming, the roar of dragons, the sound of paper tearing. Then, everything went silent. When I woke up again, I was inside a room. The boy was sitting in the corner, crying. For a moment, I did not speak. I walked to the window and looked outside. The world was ruined. Smoke covered the sky. The three-headed dragon had destroyed almost everything. Houses had fallen. Roads were cracked. Trees were stripped of color. People wandered in the distance like shadows. The giant stood outside a castle that looked tiny beside him, but even the castle was broken. One of its towers had collapsed and its bright walls had turned gray. My chest hurt. I thought of Watery Village. I had promised the children there that I would help repaint their homes, but I had not reached them in time. Now maybe their homes were gone too. I went to the boy and sat near him. "Is there no other way to save this place?" I asked. He wiped his face with his sleeve. "There is only one way." "What?" "To create it all over again," I nodded quickly. "Then I will help you know." I stared at him. "What?" "No," he said again. There were tears on his face, but he was smiling faintly, and that smile frightened me more than his crying. "I am going to close myself off," he said. "Why?" "Because I have given up outside." Something crashed in the distance. The room shook. "Every day," he continued, "by evening, those people destroy this place. Every morning, I come back and rebuild it. I hide here. I create again. I tell myself it will be better, but I am tired now." "But what about the village?" I asked. "What about everyone here?" "I do not know," he whispered. "Maybe someday, but not now." He lifted his brush one last time and drew something in the air. A casket appeared. It was simple and dark, with smooth wooden sides and a heavy lid. My stomach twisted as he opened it. He climbed inside. "No," I said, stepping forward. "Don't do this." He looked at me from inside the casket. "Goodbye, friend." "At least tell me your name," I said quickly. He looked at me with those tired eyes. "Shoaib," he said. Then he closed the lid. I froze. Shoaib, the name echoed inside my head.